Blog Talk Radio.
Live from the nation's capital, it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry, with host Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Your host, and tonight, welcome to Quintessential Listening Poetry. Our very special guest is J.P. Dancing Bear. Bear, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. It's so great to have you on the program.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm pleased. Quick question for you. What is poetry, just to get started?
Oh.
It's that kind of program.
I know. I actually, poetry is it's an elevated art form. So, you have the nuts and bolts stuff, the prose and, essay writing and all various kinds of written literature out there. And then poetry is the focal point, the accentuation, where the art meets and the art kind of takes over. And I just, for me, that's always been the way I kind of view it, is it's an elevated art form. Just like house painters are sometimes great painters and masterworks. And, there's plenty of great, oil painters out there who started off as house painters. So.
Yes, I agree. Well, with that in mind, why do you think it's important in our day and time?
Well, I think poetry is super important whenever there's a sense of crisis in the society or in the world, and people turn to poetry in those times to receive some kind of solace or comfort that they don't seem to be able to get from somewhere else. And yet there's something about a poem that resonates and will, make people want to share it. And it becomes a form of catharsis for people. And it's sometimes it's a worthy distraction. But I think, it has a purpose and a place, and oftentimes it's been replaced by, pop music or some other form of poetry that's evolved past where we're at with this particular form.
All right. You're a noted poet, and you've got 14 collections of poetry published. What sparked your love of poetry?
Well, I would have to say, and I started poetry really early on. I mean, I was very young, like probably 7 years old.
Okay.
And I remember, and I shouldn't have been reading this stuff, but there I was reading it.
Okay.
I was reading Edgar Allan Poe, and it was just, I don't think I was reading it for the macabre side of it, but I really liked Poe a lot. I also liked Frost, and I really enjoyed their works. And then the first time I was at the ocean, and it really stirred something in me. I was able to write it down and make a poem out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never stopped since.
All right. Well, with that in mind, please share one of your works.
Oh, sneak that up on me, all right? I will. I'll read a poem from my book that was just released earlier this year, which is Fish Singing Foxes, which is out from Salmon Poetry, and which is an Irish press. This is actually two books in one. So it's broken into two sections, and I'll read from the first section, which is what I used to refer to as the line poems, which is I would borrow a line from another poet's work and make it the beginning for my poem. So it would be a middle line from somebody else's work, and I would turn it into a starting line for mine. Okay. So this is The Liberators, and it's a poem starting with a line from Ilya Kaminsky. Yes, my life as a broken branch in the wind, whistles a tune known only in the stubble fields. It was March, and all I could think of was the history of marches. Too many soldiers were going to die, saving me from my freedoms. In that dream of promises and land, you were struggling to breathe enough to scream. I felt naked with the mechanized hum of Humvees all around me. God, my anger with Ares made me want to explode like a shell in the garden. It didn't care for his childlike mannerisms. We needed someone who could talk to other men, who knew why a tracer bullet burns in the retina long after its target is dead. But it was March. We would soon march. I want to be grafted to a tree where people say a prayer from the last war each night for all the children in the minefields, blossoming, blossoming for someone else's flame. The end.
That was extremely powerful.
And the whole point behind the series of poems that I wrote was that I wanted to show that a line can exist on its own and can have a life of its own.
Yes.
So I could take a line from somebody else's work and I could make it an entirely different thing altogether. And this is actually an homage to Ilya because, and I've known Ilya for a long time. We both, he started the Poets for Peace in the Bay Area, and he kind of conscripted me into his army, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was an appropriate subject to give back to him.
Well, speaking of that, what are some of the predominant themes of your work?
Well, I really didn't think I was very political for a real long time, but then I began to realize that it's always been there. So I really think that politics is kind of a swift undercurrent in my work. Even when it's a pastoral or some kind of nature poem, I think if you look hard enough, you'll find that there's some politics involved. I always thought one of the strongest political poems I ever read was by Dorian Lux, which was a poem about a tree falling in the woods, and just blew me away.
What about it blew you away?
The fact that nowhere in that poem did it just hit you over the head with a message. It was just purely a vision of a tree falling in the woods, and yet you knew what it was about. I mean, you could figure it out. So to me, that was so powerful because it was a strong metaphor that never gave into trying to tell you something. It just let itself be.
How does a poem begin for you? With an idea, a form, or an image? And maybe you've touched on it, but how does it begin for you?
For me, it always starts the same way. It's usually 1 to 4 lines, and what'll happen is that it will just continue to reverberate with me for a while. I think actually it's probably a number of times that it gets reiterated in my head. So sometimes it'll come pretty fast to the page, but I think it still goes through the same number of iterations. And then other times it'll take days before it ever hits the page. And it percolates, and the rest of the poem just kind of builds itself around that.
Please share another piece of your work.
I will read one from the other side of from the other book that's part of the same book, Fish Singing Foxes. And there's a poem in here. These are all gazelas, which I spent a long time studying gazelles and gazelas and Robert Bly and Federico Garcia Lorca and Hafiz and Rumi and all these great gazelle poets, and basically trying to make sense of the history, but also the evolution. And then this is one of those poems. This is Gazela of Unwanted Love, and it's after a poem by Federico Garcia Lorca. I never wanted you to understand anything about me, least of all my scent. I never wanted power over you. I never wanted you to think my love was cruel. You spent too much time daydreaming about what it was I thought or looked like underneath the thickest scarves and skirts. In what dark earth you would lie down. I kept you outside in the summer of rain, waiting for me to look upon your wet branches, but I wanted no word from your lips, nothing that would make you more than a shadow in the garden, waiting patient as magnolias, your mouth muted and open as a bloom, white as death's shroud, your mouth open. The end.
Another powerful and beautiful piece. Where do you go to write? Where do you write?
I tend to change my process every once in a while. Mostly I will write at my desk, usually on a computer, but I've been known to break out a notepad from time to time, and sometimes I'll use my phone. Other times I'll record something and then transcribe it. I kind of mess with the process a bit because I don't want to get too into one way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Share one more piece before we take a break.
Okay. I will read one from the book that's just about to come out, which is Of Oracles and Monsters, and that'll be released by Glass Lyre later this year. And this one is The Oracle of Trophonius, and there were a lot of famous Greek oracles. This is one of the more lesser known ones, which has to do kind of with undercurrents and spiritual stuff. Oracle of Trophonius. Body of hunches and blood-colored robes, body of denied desires, I lowered myself into the oracle's mouth, where she rose from her pool of tears, voice of black trees, voice of valley light, whispering a worm of quiet spells that chilled and warmed the old flesh. Somewhere I stopped wishing for the changes of others, ceased to need their transformations as a means of making myself content. I was no more happier with this shift, for I became the thing I needed reshaping. I walked the mists and fogs of doubt. I drank in the watery moon, but saw no shade or light that was my own. Why is it we want to move the boulders within the caves of ourselves? Stones most will never see. She was rising up to the surface. She was rising to spit me out into a fever dream. I ranted and wandered, homeless and begging, not for the charity of others, but for a kindness in myself. The end.
Your work is amazing.
Thank you.
It is. We'll be right back, everyone. We are back. I'm Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with JP Dancing Bear. JP, we have a caller. Someone would like to ask you a question.
Oh, boy. All right.
All right.
Hello, JP.
Area code 414. The first three numbers are 327. You're on the air. A question from JP.
Hi,
Yes.
Mr. Dancing Bear.
Yes.
Are you from California?
Yes, I am.
What Indian branch do you identify with, or I should say native branch, tribe? Excuse me.
My grandmother was Ojibwe.
Okay.
So from actually the Upper Penn of Michigan.
Okay.
So I'm a long way from home.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I got a little bit of blood like that. I have a grandfather that had a little Comanche and a grandmother that was a little bit of Choctaw. But my name is Catfish McDarris. I've been seeing your name, seeing JP Dancing Bear, I've been seeing it for years and years. I think we've been in a few magazines together and stuff, maybe, and I enjoy your writing a lot.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I do know who you are, actually.
You do?
Yes, I do. I have read your work.
Okay. Well, I think I'm a bigger fan of yours than you are of mine, probably. I tend to fall off into the school of Bukowski, and Michael and I have been, pals for a while. I've read on his show a few times, and
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I have a good time anytime I get together with my brother Michael here. I call him Dr. Michael.
Well, thank you so much, Catfish, for calling in. You'll be back with me in November, I believe.
Yes, I am. Are you going to switch over to Wednesdays, you still?
Just for a couple of months. We're going to check out Wednesdays just for the newness of it.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
I'll hang on here tonight if Mr. Dancing Bear gets tired of dancing. I got a couple I can dance with, but anyway, I'll wait and let you guys decide.
All right then. Thank you, Catfish. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
All
Okay,
right.
take care. Bye.
See,
All right.
I actually remember him. I remember his
Really?
work. I think he's been in Slipstream and also in Nerve Cowboy, which I was like years and years and years and years ago. Embarrassingly too many years.
Right. Right.
But I do remember names, and
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah, he's a prolific author too, just like you. Just like you. You talked about briefly. Where do you hail from? Poets hail from all over the world. Where do you hail from?
No, almost every place I've ever been, I call home. So, and it feels like home. Most of my life, I think I've lived up and down the coastal areas of California. I was actually born in Nevada, where the naval base is there, and which is Henderson. And then I moved up here to Oregon, and I call this place home too. It's nice. I get to look at eagles all the time.
Oh, wow.
I'm fascinated by them.
Why? Why are you fascinated by eagles? What about them fascinates you?
I don't. Well, one, because I always heard that they were endangered and rare and majestic, and all of that is very seeing them now on a regular basis. I see them every day. I'm blown away by that because of how special they've always been. As far as our society is concerned, at least. Up until the last few years, but yeah. I mean, just to me, because it was always presented to me that it would be a rare joy, and therefore I treat it as such.
Have you written about them?
I think I have, but I'm oddly in sort of a weird way, because they make. I don't know if you're familiar, but oftentimes TV and movies will present eagles differently when it comes to the sound they make. Most of the time, what they inject in is a red-tailed hawk, which has that kind of screeching sort of kind of.
Right.
But that's not the way they sound at all. They sound kind of like squeaky shopping wheels.
You mean all these years I thought that eagles sounded one way. A proud American eagle. And that's
when I first got here, I thought, what the heck is that noise?
Share another.
And now
poem,
I love
please.
it, but before it was like.
Share another poem, please.
Okay, I
You've
found
already
one
killed,
where I actually did write about.
Okay.
I found one where I actually did refer to them.
Okay.
This one is called the Pacific Northwest Morning Song. First, a staccato of falsetto opera as 4 eagles burst onto the scene. Then the kingfisher announces his territorial decrees, and a cacophony of dozens of dissenting opinions follows. And here I am, unemployed, deep behind fences, both real and imagined, suddenly the luckiest soul alive. The end.
You mentioned a number of poets earlier. Who are some of your major influences, and what makes them special in your eyes?
Yeah, I mentioned Poe and Frost, and that was when I was just a kid. But later, when I really decided that poetry was the thing for me, it was James Wright, and there was a poem he wrote, which was as I cross over a puddle at the end of winter, I think of you, which just blows me away. Even today, every time I read it, it's just gives me chills because he captures just that ultimate futility, the feeling of futility that you get in those lines. It's just amazing, and the frustration with it, and all the things that go along. And then I have a really wide variety of poets that I love. I mentioned Lorca, which is obviously going to be in there, but the list is just so long and wide. C.D. Wright is another one. I heard C.D. Wright read from, I think it was Trimble, and again, it was just one of those things that just blew me away. She read, and the person who read with her was Michael Ondaatje,
yes.
who wrote, and I just, both of them just read phenomenally and just blew me away. And then there's just, I've been lucky. I've got to see and listen to so many great poets over the years, and I just keep expanding every time I read something I like. I find somebody else I really enjoy. So there are a lot of contemporaries on that list. Because I just, I'm really open to just the art itself, and I honestly don't care about the school it comes from or the, what the politics are behind it, or, whether it's somebody's formal piece. If it's a villanelle, great, it's a villanelle, I love it. As long as it does what it's supposed to do and it resonates with you and you want to show it to somebody, then it's a great piece of work, and I love the author for it.
Wow. Well, share another piece of your work, because you're part of that great number that you mentioned. Share another piece of your work.
Okay, I will. I'll read another one from the book that's coming out soon. This one, I think I'll just go for a real political poem. Let me go find it real quick. Yeah, it's coming up here. All right, here it is. This poem, this whole book is basically about a particular president who will remain unnamed, who has been unnamed in this book, and I think that that's one of those things that just gets under his skin. And this one is called Homunculus. And so every time the word I is in the poem, it's on a line all by itself. I will start with my beginning. I had no mother. What she said to me was, go win something, anything. And what I found was that it didn't matter if I stole or cheated in my returns. It's fine patting my head and pointed to the exits. I was my father's child, not some drunken oligarch of mother's love like my brother. Father showed me the art of killing for pleasure, especially those who love unconditionally. Their teary eyes, not understanding how I might strangle them. I loved that, but not them. Too weak. I loved myself, and no one could match or beat that love. Later, I went out to freeze out mothers and children who believed in a fair America. I hated how they huddled, how they hugged, how they went on and on loving each other. I, hollowed skin, and within my shell, the movies of the criminal world flickered like fire. Oily shadows tar-pitted the light. I extracted fear and bottled it, then mislabeled it as patriotism. Who knew I could sell the stuff, and no consumer agency came around looking for ingredients. I stole a loan from a bank to build a bottling plant. I broke my promises. I broke women into wives, into slaves, into children who worked my factories. I see great opportunity. I would say the workers cheered. I stole more from them, and I modeled a vision of a country after black lung and mortar dust. I launched a daily dispatch of accusations and threats. Everyone should go to jail except the loyal to me. Here in my abandoned nation of children, with their open carry Bibles, their smoking guns, and lack of pre-existing, everywhere the shadow flickers of old movies makes monsters on our borders. They've come to work among us, to take our money when we aren't watching. And I tell the children, only I can fix it. And it's true, I could, but I don't, because they would leave, as everyone leaves, as my father and my brother left, as my never mother fades into my uncertainty, into the irreconcilable, inconsolable pain of only I. The end.
Do you think you were meant to be a poet?
I would say no originally.
Okay.
But I knew I was going to be a writer of some kind. And then I went to school thinking that I was going to be a novelist, and that I would make money.
Okay,
being a novelist.
I know that.
And then James Wright, that damn poem, it ruined me.
Do you have that poem in front of you?
I do not, but I can find it so easily.
Okay. Great.
And I love reading it. So
I'd love to hear.
Winter Puddle, and that should bring it up. Yep, here it is.
All right.
As I step over a puddle at the end of winter, I think of an ancient Chinese governor. And then it has an epigraph, which to me is also just completely awesome. And it's and how can I, born in evil days and fresh from failure, ask a kindness of fate? And that was written in AD 819. Po Chu-yi, balding old politician, what's the use? I think of you, uneasily entering the gorges of the Yangtze, when you were being towed up to the rapids towards some political job or other in the city of Chengshou. You made it, I guess, by dark. But it is 1960. It is almost spring again, and the tall rocks of Minneapolis build me my own black twilight of bamboo ropes and waters. Where is Yuan Shen, the friend you loved? Where is the sea that once solved the whole loneliness of the Midwest? Where is Minneapolis? I can see nothing but the great, terrible oak tree darkening with winter. Did you find the city of isolated men beyond the mountains? Or have you been holding the end of a frayed rope for 1,000 years? The end.
Wow.
Just blows me away, that poem.
It's blowing me away as well. I mean, what do you say?
Just the futility of that just blows me away.
Yes,
I
agree.
So well.
Yes, I agree 100%. You've published so much. You're a prolific author. Does knowing that your poems are published and out there in the world validate your being a poet, or are you content knowing that they're out of your system?
Well, I think to know you're a poet is the making. The other thing is a validation, it's not necessary. You could live in a cave your entire life and make art and be quite content. To me, being a poet is the making. Look at Emily Dickinson as a great example of that. Not somebody who, with one or two rare occasions, was looking to publish, but actually just was deep in the manufacture of art. Just working it every day, doing what she was doing, and oftentimes that's to me the making is the joy, and then the selling and the finding and the placing and the looking for a place and a home and all the rest of that stuff. That's not so much of a joy for me.
Okay. Please share another piece of your work.
I'll go back to Fish Singing Foxes. This is a poem that starts with a line by Margot Schultz. And the poem is titled "There You Are," and it's actually, when I was a kid, I used to listen to the Firesign Theater, which was they were an audio troupe, and there was a line from one of their albums, I forget which one, but it was called it gets picked up a lot, but the quote is, "No matter where you go, there you are." Tell the trees you'll see them later. Make it more of a promise, perhaps a prophecy, although not so much hoopla regarding your return. Say so long to the birdies, chirpingly, if you must. To keep it short, almost over your shoulder. They never were great with departures anyway. Heels clacking the asphalt, you become the metronome for all walkers. It's easy, making distance happen, leaving home, turning your back from all those things you love. So easy. You can gate the world, and you'll know if you start to circumnavigate when on the other side, halfway, the path turns muddy and rocky. The moment you begin to turn and face the things you left, your muscles will chirp with pain as you wade through the muck swamp of your doing, the darker side we all must traverse. To come back the wiser, older, harrowed one. Don't say hero here. It wasn't bravery at all that made the quest. Just one foot before the other, hoping to see the dawn coming through the open arms of trees. The end.
How has your idea of what poetry is and what poetry can do changed since you began writing poetry?
I think it's that's a great question. I think what it is.
Well, that's why they pay me the big bucks,
I think what's changed for me is a lot of the romanticism of it is gone, and it's been replaced with the reality. So, the romanticism was, oh, you're going to be a poet, and people laud you, and do all those things that never happen. And then, I think the reality is, oh, you're a creator, and you make things, and and this is your focus. This is what you do. This is what drives you, and you can no more stop doing it than stop breathing.
Powerful statement.
Thank you. I think.
So we've talked about what poetry is not in terms of potential success. What is a measure of success as a poet? What is a measure of success?
Well, honestly, I think the thing that has always given me a certain joy like no other is when someone who is just out there, who is not a poet, is not someone in the know, so to speak, who writes to you and says, I really have to tell you how much this poem touched me and what it did for me and how it changed the way I do stuff. And I've been lucky enough that my work ends up in like elementary schools sometimes, and high schools and other places. And so I get students who write to me from time to time and will say, I did this poem as my assignment and I really, it changed the way I think about poetry. But more importantly, I showed it to my dad, and my dad, who hates poetry, really liked it. And I'm thinking, yay, it's a double win, But little things like that, I think that those are the joys that, are pure. And I think those are the things that just mean the most to me, more so than other, like winning a prize or something along those lines. I think at the end of the day, knowing that somebody really got your work and it really did something for them is it's a wealth. It's a great wealth.
Well, let's take a brief break and we'll be right back. We are back. I'm Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with J.P. Dancing Bear. All poets have several words that come up over and over and over again, words or sentences that they just can't help but use in their work. What are three of your absolute favorite words to use?
Oh. Wow. I know that one of them, if I did the word search jumble thing, and which would make the the most used word the largest one, I think some form of lack of light would be there, like darkness or dark or something like that, which is so, teen goth.
Okay. All right.
And I catch myself. I make fun of myself for whenever I see it. When it's overly apparent, because my immediate impulse is to get rid of it, which sometimes I listen to and other times not. Sometimes you just have to accept that there's a little teen goth in you that wants to tap into the darkness.
All right.
But I think the other things that are more important to me are subliminal. So some form of the use of the word sublime or a derivative, or not derivative, but a synonym for that would probably be in there somewhere. I'm sure. And then I think animals. A lot of animals come into my poems. usually coyotes, and then there's other ones as well. Crows come in a lot.
Oh, wow. What is it about a crow that intrigues you?
The darkness. I had to do it. It's just sitting right there. Hey, Grandma Poe, man.
Yeah, I forgot.
No, I think in mythologies, the crow is fairly significant, and it's not just in any one particular mythology, but there's a lot of different mythologies where, crows play a pretty heavy role, and they're usually the messengers between, the underworld and the living. So I think that's always rolling around in the back of my head. It may not always come out that way, but I think somewhere in the back of my head, I associate a crow with that.
Okay. Well, share another piece of your work.
Okay, I'll share one from the new book of Oracles and Monsters, and this one is titled "Dear Jeff," and this was written after the first time we started hearing that border kids were being held in cages. When you smile, your Loki smile, I see them, all those broken children in your cages, people whose ancestors came down through this land following the migratory animal spirits, while your ancestors were a world away. In that grimacing grin of yours, Jeff, the untreated pox-ridden children are weeping, and you wear your bloody executioner's mask, harvesting the asylum seekers, people so scared of their deaths in their own countries that your torture is still a better choice. What is it about the poor and powerless that make you smile like that? A death's head's grin. Do you watch as they suffer, as you watching now? When you tell your lies on TV, do you see the dying? When I see you coyote into Congress and claim you can't recall, are you replaying the dust-choked children who are crying for their mothers? Jeff, tell me what the pharaohs sounded like when they laughed in that Bible of yours, or what tone the devil took with Jesus in the desert. People always assign too much gravitas to the fallen angel's voice, where I imagine your voice, a bit ephemeral and effeminate, insisting within the good book of yours, the cruelty you inflict on the innocent is something Christ would do. Jeff, tonight, thousands of people are wailing in your cages, while the guards threaten and menace in your name, in my name, in the name of America I wish you'd never been born in. The end.
Wow. They say that to see the world with complete honesty, one should look to comedians, artists, and poets. What do you think emerges naturally from your work?
I think I start by I think when I read my work, and I can't say what other people get out of it, but I would imagine maybe it's the same. I see a landscape first, which is painted, and it could very well be pastoral in nature, very calm and serene. And then you begin to notice the little things that are moving within the landscape, those things that may at first seem kind of odd and out of place, and then eventually become a bit more menacing upon closer inspection, and are more likely to be machinery and some kind of unnaturalness percolating, like oil rigs or something along those lines. And I think that's the way I kind of I somewhat view the world. Everything looks nice, from a long way away.
Yes.
And then once you get a little closer, you begin to realize it's not so nice.
Not that nice. Yeah, I agree with that. Please share another piece of your work. I'm really enjoying listening to you. Please share another piece of your work.
Okay. I am going to read another one from Fish Singing Foxes. This one is, I'll do one of the Gazellas because I just, I loved Gazelle. I love reading. The thing is that they're all tuned into a certain level of repetition, and that repetition goes both inside and outside the poems. So you will see themes that get repeated throughout the entire body of poetry, and then there are certain images that get repeated, and then there's words that get repeated, and I think that was very much intentional on my part.
Sure.
All right, so I'm going to read the last poem in the book, which is Gazella of Fish Singing Foxes, and this one was written for Jesse Lendenny, who is the owner of Salmon Poetry, and somebody I've had the good fortune to call a friend for a long time. The back door is left wide open again, and I don't care. I don't care if the leaves come inside to get warm in the kitchen. If you truly listen past the gurgle of the stream, you can hear fish singing foxes to fish like an open kitchen door. Out beyond the water is the song of grass and the old poets' voices between the blades that whistle a fox tune. I know the door is open for the missing, but look at the congregation of leaves singing the old fish songs. Just listen to what comes filling the void. The end. And all of these poems are supposed to be a certain level of surreality to them, and but still have kind of a pastoral quality to them, and also kind of a and have definitely that undertone of politics and other things that are just not right with the world.
Yes. Is the book Fish Singing Foxes, is it available on Amazon?
It's supposed to be.
Okay.
I'll tell you what happened. This book was originally supposed to come out a few years ago, and it actually made it to the point where it was listed on Amazon. And then when it didn't come out, Amazon said it's not available. And then when it finally did get published, the distributors had some trouble, I guess, getting it to show up on Amazon. So I'm going to look real quick just to see.
Okay.
Because the last time I checked about a month ago, it hadn't yet. There it is. Currently unavailable. See? All right.
Okay.
So you could get it from me directly.
Mm-hmm.
I do have copies available, and then so you could give them the or put the email address available, or they can order from Salmon Poetry directly.
From Salmon Poetry. All right.
Yes.
Now your new book of Oracles and Monsters. Tell us about it.
Well, yeah. So basically, I started writing it at the beginning of 2017. There were big changes in the world, and
Yes.
this started percolating up, and then I basically have kind of tracked all of the atrocities. And again, it's all usually centered around one person or their administration, but I refuse to, in the book, to mention their name anywhere.
Okay. So if you had to convince a friend to read your book, what would you say?
I would say that it's the way I feel about myself in writing this book, and what was going through my mind was fear, because I knew Chinese poets who had been part of Tiananmen,
Yes.
and had been rousted in the middle of the night because they wrote poems, which they take poetry a lot differently, and so the metaphors that they were painting with their words, the government did not like, and then some of them were organizers, of the student movement, and so it was to me that was always very scary. I never felt like something like that would ever happen here.
Yes.
But now I do. So when a president keeps an enemies list, that's a dangerous thing.
Yes, it's very dangerous. I agree.
And
Very
it's
dangerous.
frightening because comedians, authors, all the people that you said will give you insight to the world. Those are all people who end up on lists like that.
It's true too.
Look at Lorca. Look at what happened to him. Look at Ian Esco, the guy who wrote the famous play Rhinoceroses, where ultimately they kept watching them come and take his neighbors. It's frightening to live in that state where you can see it before it happens, which is the oracle part of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. I know also that you edit Verse Daily.
Yes.
Tell us about Verse Daily.
Well, I think Verse Daily is, I am the curator for Verse Daily. I think that's the way I like to think of it more than the editor. And I pick poems the way I have always picked poems in my editing process, which is if the poem speaks to me, if it resonates, then it's a poem to share. So I like to read poems aloud. I like various different crafts of poetry, but I'm not locked. Again, I'm not locked into any one particular one. I appreciate poems for what they are and how they're written and presented. And when I think there's a good one, then I want to share it. And I do exactly that. And I really don't care anything about who wrote it. That really doesn't play into my my choice. I want a poem that I want to share.
We need people like you out there sharing poems, writing poems, speaking truth to power. That is so important. That's so very, very important. One last question, and I'll let you go. When people hear your work, they usually want more. What's next for you as a poet? What's next for you as a poet? We know you've got your book coming out. What's next in addition to your book?
Well, I've been threatening to do a new and selected for a long time. And to be honest with you, I just whenever I think about it, it's too daunting, and I just kind of fall back. I've been sort of I've worked on themes for so long and themed books that right now I'm just kind of in a period of writing just whatever. So truly just kind of whatever comes to mind and not having to worry about whether it fits a thematic whatever. And it's been a real joy and a release, and I've been free flowing and unstructured, which is strange. But again, I feel it's what was necessary at the time, and I've really been enjoying it. But I'm kind of what you might say between projects. I've always wanted to collaborate with somebody, but I just I've never made that connection.
Okay. I'm sure there probably countless people who'd like to collaborate with you.
I did it once with a group where what would happen is somebody would write a poem and then I would write a response to it. And then they might write a response back, so it was like a conversation. But I've never come across anybody that wanted to do something like that.
Well, you never know. After tonight, there could be countless people who want to work with you. You never know. This show is beamed all over the world. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to be my guest. I learned so much.
It's been a pleasure. I feel like we could talk forever, which is always a good sign.
Yes, it's a good sign. I agree. And we share Claude Rains, so that helps too. I
made a joke before we got on air about Claude Rains, just so everybody's cued into what we're talking about.
Many people are like, "Who's that?"
Exactly. That's what Wikipedia is for.
That's exactly right. Well, hey, thank you so much, and I'd like you to return to the show sometime in 2020. I'd like to invite you back.
Oh, great. Sure. I'd be happy to.
I'm glad. That makes me happy. Makes me happy, too.
All right.
Well, everyone, I want to thank you for listening tonight to JP Dancing Bear. I'm sure you learned as much as I did. So have a great evening, and until next week, take care.
Bye, everyone.